For today's meditation, let us read from 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 12 to 21. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have indeed built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell in forever." Then the king turned around and blessed all the assembly of Israel, while all the assembly of Israel stood. And he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who with his hand has fulfilled what he promised with his mouth to David, my father, saying, Since the day that I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I chose no city out of all the tribes of Israel in which to build a house, that my name might be there. But I chose David to be over my people Israel. Now it was in the heart of David my father to build a house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. The Lord said to David, my father, whereas it was in your heart to build a house for my name, you did well that it was in your heart. Nevertheless, you shall not build the house, but your son, who shall be born to you, shall build the house for my name. Now the Lord has fulfilled his promise that he made. For I have risen in the place of David my father, and sit on the throne of Israel as the Lord promised. And I have built the house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. And there I have provided a place for the ark, in which is the covenant of the Lord that he made with our fathers, when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. After years of construction, the temple that Solomon built for the Lord was finally completed. But despite its magnificence, this glorious structure would have no significance without the presence of God. As Solomon gathered the people of Israel for the temple's dedication, he knew that it wasn't the grandeur of the building or the richness of its decorations that mattered most. It was the abiding presence of the Almighty that would make the temple a holy place. Solomon's role was simply to create a space that could house the Ark of the Covenant, which represented the presence of God. In the same way, we too can only prepare our hearts as a dwelling place for God's Spirit. After the priest had brought the ark into the most holy place, placing it under the wings of the cherubim, something extraordinary happened. When the priest came out of the holy place, the temple was filled with a cloud. The glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord, so much so that the priest could not continue their service because of the cloud. Verse 10 and 11. This cloud was a visible manifestation of God's glory. It was the same cloud that had accompanied the Israelites throughout the wilderness, providing guidance and protection. This was a cloud in which God spoke to Moses and through which he revealed his presence. The filling of the temple with this cloud was a powerful sign that God was pleased to dwell among his people. At this moment, Solomon recognized the fulfillment of God's promises. His father had long desired to build a temple for the Lord, but it was God's will that Solomon would complete the task. In his dedication speech, Solomon made it clear that though the vision came from David, it was ultimately God's plan. Solomon had been faithful to carry out the work, ensuring that everything was done according to the law, even in the transportation of the ark, which had been mishandled earlier in David's reign. Solomon himself stood outside the temple, demonstrating his reverence for God's holiness. Solomon then turned to the Lord in prayer, offering a heartfelt prayer of dedication and intercession. His prayer demonstrates his deep understanding of God's greatness, mercy, and faithfulness. It serves as a profound example of how to approach God in humility and seek his favor, not just for ourselves, but on behalf of others. In his prayer, Solomon makes several key petitions. He acknowledged God's character by and promises by praising God for his faithfulness in keeping his promises. He acknowledges that God is both a promise maker and a promise keeper, having fulfilled what he promised to David. Solomon knows that it was not by his efforts alone that the temple was completed, but by God's guiding hand. Solomon asked that God's eyes and heart would always be on this house. Though Solomon knew that even the highest heavens could not contain God, he still asked that God's presence would dwell in the temple and that the prayers of those who seek him there would be heard. His prayer reveals his heart for the people of Israel. He does not simply dedicate the temple for ceremonial purposes. He intercedes for his nation. He asks God to hear their prayers in various situations. When they take an oath at the temple and needed God to witnesses. When they are defeated in battle because of their sin and then turn to God in repentance. When famine, plague, drought strikes the land and the people pray around the temple seeking deliverance. When a foreigner who does not belong to Israel comes to pray seeking the Lord's help. When Israel goes to war and prays for victory. Or when they find themselves in captivity because of their sin and pray toward the temple and asking for forgiveness. In every case, Solomon prays that God would be merciful and respond to the prayers of his people. He recognizes that the people of Israel are not perfect, and they will inevitably stumble and fall into sin. But when they come to God in genuine repentance, Solomon asks that God would forgive them and restore them. After this, his prayer, Solomon turns to bless the assembly of Israel. In his long prayer, he says, "May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our ancestors. May he never leave us nor forsake us. May he turn our hearts toward him, to walk in obedience to him and keep the commands, decrees, and laws he gave our ancestors. And may these words of mine which I have prayed before the Lord be near to the Lord our God day and night, that he may uphold the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel according to each day's need, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God and that there is no other. And may your hearts be fully committed to the Lord our God, to live by his decrees and obey his commands as at this time." Verses 57 to 61. This blessing shows Solomon's deep concern that the people of Israel remain faithful to God. He knows that true worship is not just about rituals and ceremonies, but about a heart fully committed to walking in God's ways. Solomon's prayer of dedication reveals profound truths about God's character and his desire to dwell among his people. Through the consecration of the temple, God was fulfilling his promise to David, and through Solomon's intercession, he was establishing a pattern for how his people should approach him in prayer. Solomon's humility in acknowledging that God cannot be contained even in the heavens, much less in a temple, is a reminder that no building or ritual can fully capture the majesty of God. And God graciously chooses to dwell among his people and is willing to hear their prayers when they turn to him. Just as Solomon interceded for Israel, we are called to intercede for others, trusting in God's faithfulness to hear and respond. As Solomon prayed, "May the Lord our God be with us. May he turn our hearts towards him." So too, we should seek to live lives fully committed to God, walking in his statutes and trusting in his mercy when we fall. Solomon's prayer is a timeless reminder of the power of dedication and intercession, and it calls us to offer our hearts as a temple for God's presence, seeking him with humility and faith. God bless.